Marcus Johnson's worn shoes made soft clicking sounds against the polished floor of Golden Age Community Center as he walked through its halls one sunny Tuesday morning. At 28 years old, he had already seen more struggles than most people face in a lifetime. Growing up in the roughest part of downtown Chicago, he had learned early that life rarely gave handouts to boys like him. His dark skin glistened with sweat from the broken air conditioning unit as he arranged chairs for the morning's senior activity session. It wasn't a glamorous job, but it paid enough to keep food on his table and help his mother with her bills. More importantly, it let him make a difference in people's lives, even if in small ways. "Young man, could you help me with these bags?" A refined voice called out from behind him. Marcus turned to find an elegant elderly woman struggling with several heavy-looking shopping bags. Her silver hair was perfectly styled, and her clothes spoke of wealth that Marcus had only seen in magazine pages. She was Eleanor Whitman, though he didn't know it yet, the woman who would change his life forever. "Of course, ma'am," Marcus replied, hurrying to take the bags from her hands. The expensive leather of the handles felt foreign against his calloused palms. "Such a gentleman," Eleanor smiled, her blue eyes twinkling with warmth. "I'm bringing supplies for the art therapy class, though I'm beginning to think I may have overdone it with the shopping." As Marcus helped her set up the art supplies, he couldn't help but notice how different she was from the other seniors who visited the center. Most came from the surrounding working-class neighborhoods, but everything about Eleanor, from her pearls to her posture, suggested she belonged in the wealthy suburbs across town. "I don't believe I've seen you here before," Marcus ventured, carefully arranging paintbrushes on the tables. "Oh, I just moved to the city," Eleanor explained, unpacking watercolor sets. "After my husband passed last year, our house in the suburbs felt too empty. I decided it was time for a change, and to do something meaningful with my time." Marcus nodded, understanding the need to find purpose. "I'm Marcus Johnson, by the way. I work here full-time." "Eleanor Whitman." She introduced herself with a graceful handshake. "And I must say, Marcus, it's refreshing to see someone your age so dedicated to community service." Over the next few hours, Marcus found himself repeatedly glancing toward the art therapy corner. Eleanor moved among the seniors with natural ease, offering encouragement and gentle guidance. Her laugh carried across the room, genuine and warm, making even the grumpiest participants smile. During his lunch break, Marcus was surprised to find Eleanor sitting alone in the break room, sipping tea from a paper cup. "Mind if I join you?" he asked, holding his simple sandwich. "Please do." Eleanor gestured to the chair across from her. "I'd love to hear what brought you to work here." Before he knew it, Marcus was sharing stories about his childhood, about his mother working 3 jobs to keep him in school, about his dreams of going to college derailed by financial reality, about his determination to help others despite his own challenges. Eleanor listened intently, asking thoughtful questions that made Marcus feel truly heard. She shared her own stories too, of teaching literature at prestigious universities, of losing her husband of 50 years, of feeling lost until she found purpose in volunteer work. "You remind me of my late husband," Eleanor said softly. "He also came from humble beginnings, but had such a beautiful spirit. Money never changed that about him." As the day drew to a close, Marcus found himself looking forward to seeing Eleanor again. There was something special about her, a genuineness that transcended their obvious differences in age, race, and social status. What Marcus didn't know then was that this day marked the beginning of a story that would challenge everything he thought he knew about love, life, and happiness. As he watched Eleanor's car, a modest sedan despite her obvious wealth, pull away from the center, he felt a strange flutter in his chest, one that he wouldn't understand until much later. This was just the first page of their unexpected story, written by fate in the most unlikely of places, a community center where a poor black boy from the wrong side of town would meet a wealthy widow who would turn his world upside down. Over the next few weeks, Marcus found himself looking forward to Tuesdays and Thursdays, the days when Eleanor came to teach art therapy. He started arriving at work earlier on those mornings, making sure the art room was perfectly arranged before she arrived. His coworkers noticed the change in his behavior and often teased him about it. "Your wealthy friend is here," Lisa, the receptionist, would announce with a knowing smile whenever Eleanor's car pulled into the parking lot. But Marcus didn't care about the teasing. There was something different about Eleanor that drew him in. Not her money, but her kind heart and the way she treated everyone with equal respect, regardless of their background. One rainy Thursday afternoon, Marcus discovered Eleanor standing outside the center, looking distressed. Her car wouldn't start, and the rain was getting heavier by the minute. "Let me give you a ride home," Marcus offered, though he felt embarrassed about his old, beaten-up Honda Civic. Eleanor hesitated for a moment, then smiled warmly. "That would be wonderful, thank you." As they drove through the wealthy part of town where Eleanor lived, Marcus felt increasingly self-conscious about his car's squeaky wipers and the duct tape holding one of the mirrors in place. But Eleanor didn't seem to notice or care. "Would you like to come in for some tea?" she asked when they reached her elegant townhouse. "It's the least I can do to thank you." Marcus wanted to refuse. This wasn't his world, but the genuine warmth in Eleanor's invitation made him accept. Inside, he found himself in a home that looked like it belonged in a magazine, with antique furniture and original artwork on every wall. "My late husband was an art collector," Eleanor explained, noticing Marcus's amazement at a large painting. "But you know what? None of these expensive pieces bring me as much joy as watching our seniors create their own art at the center." As they sat in her kitchen drinking tea from delicate china cups, Eleanor shared more about her life. She had been a literature professor at prestigious universities, had traveled the world, and had lived a life Marcus could only dream of. But there was a loneliness in her eyes when she talked about her current life. "My children think I've lost my mind," she confessed. "They can't understand why I spend time at a community center in that part of town when I could be playing bridge at the country club." Marcus understood judgment all too well. "People always want to put you in a box," he said. "They think they know who you are just by looking at you." Eleanor reached across the table and patted his hand. "That's exactly it, Marcus. That's why I feel so comfortable with you. You see people for who they are, not what they have or where they come from." Their conversation flowed naturally, touching on books, dreams, and life experiences. Hours passed without either of them noticing. When Marcus finally looked at his watch, he was shocked to see it was nearly 9 p.m. "I should go," he said reluctantly. "I have an early shift tomorrow." As Eleanor walked him to the door, she stopped suddenly. "Marcus, would you like to join me for dinner next week? I make a mean pot roast, and it gets rather lonely eating alone." Marcus knew he should say no. He could already hear the whispers at work, the raised eyebrows, the assumptions people would make about a young black man spending time with a wealthy older white woman. But looking at Eleanor's hopeful expression, he found himself nodding. "I'd like that very much," he said softly. What neither of them realized at that moment was that this simple dinner invitation would set in motion a series of events that would challenge their own prejudices, defy society's expectations, and lead them down a path neither had ever imagined possible. As Marcus drove home that night, his mind kept returning to Eleanor's smile, her kindness, and the way she made him feel valued for who he was, not what he lacked. For the first time in his life, he felt seen, truly seen, by someone from a world so different from his own. The dinner at Eleanor's house changed everything. Marcus arrived that evening wearing his best shirt, a navy blue button-down he'd bought on sale last Christmas. His hands were sweating as he held a small bouquet of flowers he'd picked up from the corner store. When Eleanor opened the door, the smell of pot roast filled the air. She wore a simple but elegant dress, and her face lit up when she saw the flowers. "Oh, Marcus, they're lovely. Come in, come in." The dinner table was set with fine china and crystal glasses that probably cost more than Marcus's monthly rent. But Eleanor had a way of making him feel comfortable, like he belonged there. "I hope you don't mind," she said, "but I invited someone else to join us." Before Marcus could respond, the doorbell rang. Eleanor opened it to reveal an elderly black woman with kind eyes and gray hair pulled back in a neat bun. "Marcus, this is my dear friend Rose. She was my colleague at the university for 30 years. Rose's presence immediately put Marcus at ease. Over dinner, she shared stories about teaching alongside Eleanor, about breaking barriers as one of the first black female professors at their university, and about the friendship that had developed despite the social pressures of their time. "You know," Rose said, looking between Marcus and Eleanor, "true connections don't care about the boxes society puts us in." As they enjoyed Eleanor's homemade apple pie for dessert, Marcus noticed how Rose and Eleanor interacted, with a comfort born of decades of friendship. It made him see Eleanor in a new light, understanding that she had always been someone who looked beyond surface differences. After Rose left, Marcus helped Eleanor with the dishes, despite her protests. Their hands touched briefly as she passed him a plate to dry, and neither pulled away immediately. "Thank you for inviting Rose," Marcus said softly. "I understand now why you did it." Eleanor smiled, but her eyes were serious. "Marcus, I've been thinking a lot about our friendship. People are starting to talk at the center." Marcus's heart sank. He had noticed the whispers, the raised eyebrows when he and Eleanor spent time together. "I can stop coming by so often if it's causing problems," he offered, though the words hurt to say. "No," Eleanor said firmly, turning to face him. "That's not what I want at all. I invited Rose tonight because I wanted you to see that I've never cared what others think about who I choose to have in my life." She took a deep breath before continuing. "Marcus, I know there are many reasons why our friendship might seem inappropriate to others. The age difference, our different backgrounds, race. But when I'm with you, I feel more alive than I have in years." Marcus put down the dish towel, his heart pounding. "Eleanor, You don't have to say anything," she interrupted. "I just wanted you to know that I value our friendship more than I care about gossip. And if you're comfortable with it, I'd like to spend more time with you, not less." In that moment, standing in Eleanor's kitchen with soapy dishes between them, Marcus realized he was falling in love. Not with Eleanor's wealth or status, but with her heart, her mind, and her courage to be true to herself. "I'd like that too," he said simply. What happened next surprised them both. Eleanor reached up and touched his cheek gently, her eyes filled with emotions neither of them was ready to name. Marcus leaned into her touch, closing his eyes. The moment was interrupted by the sharp ring of Eleanor's phone. It was her daughter Catherine, calling for their weekly check-in. Eleanor answered with a slightly shaky voice, and Marcus took that as his cue to leave. As he drove home that night, his mind was spinning. He knew that what he was feeling was impossible, inappropriate, and would likely lead to heartbreak. But for the first time in his life, he understood what people meant when they said the heart wants what it wants. Little did he know, Eleanor lay awake that same night, touching her hand where it had rested on his cheek, wondering if she was too old to believe in second chances at love. The news spread through the community center like wildfire. Marcus and Eleanor had been seen having dinner together at an expensive restaurant downtown. Someone's cousin who worked as a valet had spotted them, and within days, everyone seemed to have an opinion about their relationship. Marcus tried to ignore the whispers and stares at work, but it wasn't easy. Some of his coworkers stopped talking when he entered the break room. Others gave him knowing looks or made subtle jokes about gold diggers. Even Lisa, who had always been friendly, now watched him with suspicious eyes. Eleanor noticed the change too. One Tuesday morning, she overheard two seniors whispering about her being a foolish old woman who was being taken advantage of. Her hands shook as she set up the art supplies, but she held her head high. That afternoon, Marcus found her in the parking lot, wiping tears from her eyes. "We need to talk," Eleanor said, her voice trembling. "Can you come over after work?" Marcus spent the rest of his shift in a fog of worry. When he arrived at Eleanor's house that evening, he found her sitting in her living room, looking smaller and more vulnerable than he ever seen her. "My children are coming to visit tomorrow," she said without preamble. "They've heard about us from their friends here in town. Catherine, my daughter, says I'm embarrassing the family." Marcus felt his heart sink. "Eleanor, maybe we should." "Don't you dare suggest we stop seeing each other," Eleanor interrupted, suddenly fierce. "I'm 76 years old, Marcus. I've spent my whole life doing what was expected of me. Being the perfect daughter, the perfect wife, the perfect mother. For once in my life, I want to follow my heart." She stood up and walked to where he stood, taking his hands in hers. "I know what people think, that you're after my money, that I'm having some sort of late-life crisis. But they don't know us. They don't know how you make me feel young again, how your kindness and intelligence light up my world." Marcus felt tears forming in his eyes. "Eleanor, I'm scared," he admitted. "Not of what people say about me, but of hurting you, your family, your reputation." "I love you, Marcus Johnson," Eleanor declared, her voice strong and clear. "I didn't plan it, and God knows I tried to fight it, but I love you. And if you feel anything for me, I'm asking you to be brave enough to admit it." The room fell silent except for the ticking of the antique grandfather clock. Marcus looked at Eleanor, really looked at her. He saw the strength in her eyes, the determination in her stance, and the love that radiated from her entire being. In that moment, age and race and wealth all fell away, and he saw only the woman who had captured his heart. "I love you too," he whispered, pulling her into a gentle embrace. "I think I've loved you since that first day when you asked me to help with your art supplies." They stood there holding each other, both crying and laughing at the same time. When they finally pulled apart, Eleanor wiped her eyes and smiled. "Well, I suppose we should prepare for tomorrow," she said. "My children won't make this easy." "We'll face them together," Marcus promised. "Just like we'll face everything else." As they sat together on Eleanor's expensive sofa, planning how to handle her children's visit, Marcus realized something important. Love didn't care about age or race or money. It didn't follow society's rules or bend to other people's expectations. True love, when it came, simply demanded to be acknowledged and embraced. Tomorrow would bring its challenges. There would be angry words, accusations, and probably more tears. But tonight, in this moment, two people who had found each other against all odds were finally brave enough to admit their love. And sometimes, that kind of bravery was enough to change the world, or at least their small corner of it. The next morning arrived with dark clouds hanging over Chicago. Eleanor's children were due at 11, and Marcus arrived early to support her. He found her in the kitchen, already dressed in her best silk blouse and pearl necklace, nervously rearranging cookies on a silver platter. "You don't have to stay," Eleanor said softly. "Catherine can be difficult." Marcus took her trembling hands in his. "I'm not going anywhere." The doorbell rang at exactly 11. Eleanor squeezed Marcus's hand once before going to answer it. In walked Catherine, a tall woman in her 50s wearing an expensive business suit, followed by her younger brother James, who looked uncomfortable in his casual blazer. The silence that filled the room was deafening. Catherine spoke first, her voice cold. "So it's true. Mother, what are you thinking?" Eleanor stood straighter. "I'm thinking that I'm happy for the first time since your father died." "Happy?" Catherine's laugh was bitter. "You're being manipulated by a man young enough to be your grandson, a man who probably sees you as nothing but a walking bank account." Marcus felt his face burn, but before he could speak, James stepped forward. "Catherine, stop," he said quietly. "Look at Mom. Really look at her." Catherine paused, finally taking in her mother's appearance. Eleanor was standing tall, her eyes bright with a fire that had been missing since their father's death. She looked younger somehow, more alive. "I know this is shocking," Eleanor said gently, "but Marcus has brought joy back into my life. He sees me as a person, not just an old woman or a wealthy widow." "Do you know what people are saying?" Catherine demanded. "Your friends at the country club are horrified. The charity board is questioning your mental state. And now we find out you're spending time at some community center in a dangerous neighborhood." "That dangerous neighborhood is where I grew up," Marcus spoke for the first time. "It's where I work helping people. Your mother volunteers there because she cares about making a difference, not about what her country club friends think." James studied Marcus carefully. "How can we be sure your intentions are honorable?" Eleanor surprised everyone by laughing. "Because I've already changed my will." All eyes turned to her in shock. "I modified it last month," she continued calmly. "I left the bulk of my estate to establish a foundation supporting education in underserved communities. Marcus doesn't know this because he's never asked about my money. The only thing he's ever asked for is my time." Catherine sank into a chair, her face pale. James looked thoughtful. "Mom," he said slowly, "are you really sure about this, about him?" Eleanor walked to Marcus's side and took his hand. "More sure than I've been about anything in a long time. I know it's unconventional. I know people will talk. But I've lived long enough to know that happiness is too precious to throw away because of what others might think." Catherine stood up abruptly. "This is insane. I won't be part of this scandal." She grabbed her purse and headed for the door. James lingered, looking between his mother and Marcus. Finally, he spoke. "Mom was different after Dad died. Smaller somehow. Now she looks like herself again." He turned to Marcus. "If you hurt her—" "I would never," Marcus said firmly. After the children left, Eleanor collapsed onto the sofa, emotionally drained. Marcus sat beside her, holding her close. I'm sorry about Catherine, she whispered. She loves you, Marcus replied. She's just scared. Give her time. Eleanor looked up at him with tear-filled eyes. Did you mean what you said? About never hurting me? Marcus kissed her forehead gently. Eleanor, you've given me something more valuable than any amount of money. You've given me love without conditions, acceptance without judgment. I will spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of that gift. Outside, the dark clouds finally broke and sunlight streamed through the windows. It felt like a sign. After the storm, there was always light. 2 weeks after the confrontation with Eleanor's children, Marcus decided it was time for Eleanor to meet his mother. He had been putting it off, worried about how his mom would react, but he couldn't delay it any longer. His hands shook slightly as he dialed his mother's number. Sarah Johnson lived in a small apartment on the south side of Chicago, where she had raised Marcus alone after his father left. She worked as a hospital custodian, and her hands were rough from years of hard work. When Marcus told her he was bringing someone special to meet her, she immediately started planning a Sunday dinner. Mama, Marcus said hesitantly over the phone, there's something you should know about Eleanor. But his mother cut him off. Baby, I already know. News travels fast in our community. Just bring her over and let me meet this woman who's stolen my son's heart. That Sunday, Marcus drove Eleanor to his childhood neighborhood. He could see her taking in the graffiti-covered walls, the broken streetlights, and the children playing on cracked sidewalks. But unlike others from her world who might have shown fear or disgust, Eleanor's eyes were filled with understanding and respect for the community that had shaped the man she loved. Sarah opened the door before they could knock, wearing her best church dress and a warm smile. Come in, she said, pulling Marcus into a tight hug before turning to Eleanor. The two women stood looking at each other for a moment. Sarah, short and sturdy in her simple dress, and Eleanor, tall and elegant in her expensive clothes. Then Sarah did something that brought tears to Marcus's eyes. She opened her arms and hugged Eleanor as if she were family. Thank you for loving my boy, Sarah whispered, loud enough for Marcus to hear. Eleanor hugged her back tightly. Thank you for raising such a wonderful man. Over Sarah's famous pot roast and cornbread, they shared stories and laughter. Eleanor listened intently as Sarah talked about Marcus's childhood. His dreams of becoming a doctor before money problems forced him to start working after high school, his determination to help others even when they had so little themselves. You know, Sarah said, serving homemade peach cobbler for dessert. I used to pray every night for God to send someone special to love my Marcus. I just didn't expect him to answer my prayers quite like this. She smiled warmly at Eleanor. But looking at you two, I can see his hand in it. Later that evening, as they were preparing to leave, Sarah pulled Marcus aside while Eleanor used the bathroom. Baby, that woman loves you with her whole heart, she said softly. I can see it in the way she looks at you. Don't you let anyone tell you it's wrong. Marcus hugged his mother tight. Thanks, Mama, that means everything to me. When Eleanor came back, Sarah pressed a small, wrapped package into her hands. This was my grandmother's, she explained. She got it from her mama, who was born into slavery. It's not worth much money, but it's precious to our family. Eleanor opened the package carefully to find a simple silver locket, tarnished with age. Inside was a tiny photograph of a young black woman in old-fashioned dress. Now you're family too, Sarah said firmly. Eleanor's hands trembled as she held the locket. I don't know what to say. Say you'll take care of my boy, Sarah replied. That's all a mother needs to hear. As they drove home that night, Eleanor kept touching the locket around her neck. Your mother is an extraordinary woman, she said softly. Marcus smiled, thinking about how his two favorite women had bonded. Now you know where I get it from. That night proved that love could bridge any gap, heal any wound, and create family bonds that transcended race, class, and age. In Sarah's small apartment, over simple food served with great love, they had found acceptance that the wealthy country club would never understand. 1 month after the dinner with Marcus's mother, Eleanor didn't show up at the community center for her regular art therapy class. Marcus tried calling her cell phone, but there was no answer. By afternoon, worry had settled deep in his stomach like a heavy stone. When his shift ended, he rushed to Eleanor's townhouse. Her car was in the driveway, but she didn't answer the door. Using the spare key she had given him for emergencies, Marcus entered the house, his heart pounding. Eleanor? he called out, his voice echoing through the quiet rooms. A weak voice responded from upstairs. Marcus, I'm in the bedroom. He took the stairs two at a time and found Eleanor lying in bed, looking pale and tired. A collection of pill bottles sat on her bedside table, and medical papers were scattered across the blanket. Why didn't you call me? Marcus asked softly, sitting on the edge of the bed and taking her hand. Eleanor's blue eyes filled with tears. I didn't want to worry you. The doctor called yesterday with my test results. The cancer is back, and this time, her voice broke. Marcus felt like someone had punched him in the chest. No, he whispered. There must be treatment options. There are, Eleanor said, squeezing his hand. But the doctors say even with aggressive treatment, I might only have 6 months to a year. She looked away. Marcus, you're young. You should be with someone who has a future to offer you. Marcus's response was immediate and fierce. Don't you dare push me away. I love you, Eleanor Whitman, and I'm not going anywhere. That evening, Marcus called his mother and the community center to take time off. He moved into Eleanor's guest room, determined to be there for every doctor's appointment, every treatment, every moment they had left together. Days turned into weeks, and Eleanor started chemotherapy. Marcus held her hair back when she was sick, read to her when she was too tired to hold a book, and made sure she ate even when food held no appeal. One particularly rough evening, after Eleanor had finally fallen asleep, Marcus found himself in her study, looking at old photographs. There was Eleanor as a young professor, Eleanor with her late husband, Eleanor with her children, a life full of memories. James, Eleanor's son, found him there. He had started visiting regularly after Eleanor's diagnosis, slowly accepting the unique love between his mother and Marcus. You know, James said quietly, I've never seen anyone love my mother the way you do. Not even my father, though he was a good man. Marcus wiped tears from his eyes. I just wish we had more time. Then make the most of what you have, James replied. Which is why I brought this. He pulled a small box from his pocket and handed it to Marcus. Inside was a beautiful vintage engagement ring. It was my grandmother's, James explained. Mom always loved it. Catherine and I talked it over, and we want you to have it. Marcus stared at the ring in shock, but I thought Catherine hated me. James smiled sadly. Seeing how you've cared for Mom through all this, it changed her mind. She said anyone who loves our mother this purely deserves to be family. The next morning, Marcus waited until Eleanor had finished her breakfast and was sitting in her favorite sunroom chair, wrapped in a soft blanket. Eleanor, he said, kneeling beside her chair, I know our time might be short, but I want to spend every second of it as your husband. Will you marry me? Eleanor's tired face lit up with joy as Marcus slipped her mother's ring onto her finger. Yes, she whispered. 1,000 times yes. They were married 2 weeks later in Eleanor's garden. Sarah stood beside her son, crying happy tears. James walked his mother down the aisle, and even Catherine attended, finally understanding that true love knows no boundaries. As Marcus kissed his bride, Eleanor's eyes sparkled with a light that defied her illness. In that moment, they weren't a young black man and an elderly white woman. They were simply two souls who had found each other against all odds, proving that love was stronger than prejudice, stronger than social expectations, and even stronger than death itself. 5 years had passed since Eleanor's diagnosis, defying all medical predictions. Though her body had grown weaker, her spirit remained as strong as ever. Marcus had not left her side, proving every day that their love was real and lasting. On a warm spring morning, Marcus wheeled Eleanor through the newly opened Eleanor and Marcus Johnson Community Education Center. The building stood proud in Marcus's old neighborhood, its fresh paint and modern design a beacon of hope in the community. Children rushed past them, heading to free after-school programs, while adults gathered for job training classes. Can you believe it? Eleanor smiled, touching Marcus's hand on her wheelchair. All those people who thought you were after my money, and look what we built together instead. The center was Eleanor's dream come true, a place where education and opportunity were available to everyone, regardless of their background. She had used her fortune to create something meaningful, something that would last long after she was gone. Catherine, who now served on the center's board of directors, approached them with a thick folder of papers. Mom, the new scholarship program is ready to launch. 10 full college scholarships every year for students from the neighborhood. Eleanor beamed with pride. Her daughter had come full circle, from rejecting Marcus to embracing their vision of community transformation. The scholarships would be named after Sarah Johnson, Marcus's mother, who had passed away the previous year. That evening, as Marcus helped Eleanor into bed, she held his face in her fragile hands. "My love," she whispered, "I need you to know something. These 5 years with you have been worth more than all my previous years combined." Marcus felt tears forming in his eyes. He had learned to read the signs. Eleanor was getting ready to say goodbye. "I'm not ready," he said softly. "No one ever is," Eleanor smiled. "But look at all we've accomplished. We changed minds, broke down barriers, and created something beautiful together. And most importantly, we loved without fear." She reached for the silver locket that still hung around her neck, Sarah's family heirloom. "Promise me you'll tell our story," she said. "Tell people how a poor black boy and a wealthy old white woman found love that was stronger than prejudice. Tell them how that love built bridges and changed lives." Marcus held her close, feeling her heart beat against his chest. "I promise," he whispered. That night, Eleanor slipped away peacefully in her sleep, holding Marcus's hand. She had lived 5 years longer than any doctor predicted, powered by love and determination to see their shared dreams come true. At her funeral, people from 2 different worlds came together. Country club members sat beside community center students, wealthy socialites next to working-class families. James delivered a moving eulogy about love that transcends boundaries, while Catherine spoke about learning to see beyond prejudice through her mother's example. 1 month after Eleanor's passing, Marcus stood at the podium of their community center, addressing the first class of scholarship recipients. Around his neck hung Sarah's silver locket, now containing 2 photos, the original one of his ancestor and a new one of Eleanor. "My wife believed that love could change the world," he told the eager young faces before him. "She taught me that age is just a number, that wealth is measured by what you give rather than what you have, and that the heart knows no color." He touched the locket gently. "Eleanor and I faced judgment, ridicule, and rejection. But we also found acceptance, understanding, and the kind of love that comes once in a lifetime. Through this center, her love continues to change lives." Later that evening, Marcus walked through the quiet halls of their center. You could almost feel Eleanor's presence in the art therapy room, hear her laugh echoing through the corridors. Though she was gone, their love story lived on in every life touched by their legacy. For in the end, theirs was more than just a love story. It was a testament to the power of looking beyond appearances, of choosing love over judgment, and of believing that 2 hearts can bridge any divide. Marcus and Eleanor's unexpected love had indeed changed their corner of the world, one life at a time.